In particular, Slocum's attention is held by Bachelard's parenthetical, note 384. I haven't corrected this typo because it seems to me less like an error of transcription and more like a revealing slip on Zampano's part, where a parenthetical mention of youth suddenly becomes a parent ethical question about how to relate to youth. And note 384. Reference to his own childhood and presumably the right of growing up. How extraordinary to find in those ever-expandable brackets such a telling correlation between the answer to the Sphinx's riddle and Navidson's crisis. Indeed, by continuing to build on Bachelard, Slocum treats the snail in Navidson's dream as a remarkable inversion of the house's spiral staircase. Robinet believed that it was by rolling over and over that the snail built its staircase. Thus, the snail's entire house would be a stairwell. With each contortion, this limp animal adds a step to its spiral staircase. It contorts itself in order to advance and grow. Page 122, The Poetics of Space, note 385. Original text. Robinet a pensé que c'est en roulant sur lui-même que le limaçon a fabriqué son escalier. Ainsi, toute la maison de l'escargot serait une cage d'escalier. À chaque contorsion, l'animal me fait une marche de son escalier en colimaçon. Il se contorsionne pour avancer et grandir. And of course, who can forget Derrida's remarks on this subject in footnote 5 in Tympan, in Marge de la Philosophie, Paris, Les Éditions de Minuit, 1972, pages 11 to 12. French text, note 386. Tympanum, Dionysianism, Labyrinth, Ariadne's thread. We are now traveling through upright, walking, dancing, included and enveloped within it, never to emerge, the form of an ear constructed around a barrier, going round its inner walls, a city, therefore, labyrinth, semicircular canals. Warning, the spiral walkways do not hold. Circling around like a stairway winding around a lock, a dike, dam, stretched out toward the sea, closed in on itself and open to the sea's path. Full and empty of its water, the anamnesis of the concha resonates alone on the beach, as translated by Alan Bass. Editors, endnote 386. In his own note buried within the already existing footnote, in this case not 5, but enlarged now to 9, Alan Bass, translator for Margins of Philosophy, Chicago, University of Chicago Press, 1981, further illuminates the above by making the following comments here below. There is an elaborate play on the words limaçon and conque here. Limaçon, aside from meaning snail, means spiral staircase, and the spiral canal that is part of the inner ear. Conque means both conch and concha, the largest cavity of the external ear. End note 385. Still more remarkable than even this marvelous coincidence is the poem Bachelard chooses to quote by René Rouquier. C'est un escargot énorme qui descend de la montagne et le ruisseau l'accompagne de sa bave blanche très vive. Il n'a plus qu'un corne, c'est son corps clocher carré. Note 387. René Rouquier's La Bulle de Verre, Paris, Séguier, page 12, note 388. A giant snail comes down from the mountain, followed by a stream of its white slime. So very old, it has only one horn left, short and square, like a church tower. Editors, endnote 388 and note 387. Navidson is not the first to envision a snail as large as a village, but what fascinates Slocum more than anything else is the lack of threat in the dream. Unlike the dread lying in wait at the bottom of the wishing well, Slocum comments, the snail provides nourishment. Its shell offers the redemption of beauty, and despite Navidson's dying candle, its curves still hold out the promise of even greater illumination, all of which is in stark contrast to the house. There the walls are black. In the dream of the snail, they are white. There you starve. In the dream, the town is fed for a lifetime. There the maze is threatening. In the dream, the spiral is pleasing. There you descend. In the dream, you ascend, and so on. Slocum argues that what makes the dream so particularly resonant is its inherent balance. Town-country, inside-outside, society-individual, light-dark, night-day, etc., etc. Pleasure is derived from the detection of these elements. They create harmonies, and out of harmonies comes a balm for the soul. Of course, the more extensive the symmetry, the greater and more lasting the pleasure. Slocum contends that the dream planted the seed in Navidson's mind to try a different path, which was exactly what he did do in exploration number 5. Or more accurately, the dream was the flowering of a seed previously planted by the house in his unconsciousness. When bringing to a conclusion at a snail's pace, Slocum further opens up his analysis to the notion that both dreams, the wishing well and the snail, suggested to Navidson the possibility that he could locate either within himself or within that vast missing, some emancipatory sense to put to rest his confusions and troubles, even put to rest the confusions and troubles of others, a curative symmetry to last the ages. For the more troubling, and by far most terrifying, dream number 3, Mia Haven and Lance Slocum team up together to ply the curvatures of that strange stretch of imaginings. Unlike numbers 1 and 2, this dream is particularly difficult to recount, and requires that careful attention be paid to the various temporal and even tonal shifts. 2 pages missing. Note 389. Note 390. 3:19 a.m. I woke up slick with sweat. And I'm not talking wet in the pits or wet on the brow. I'm talking scalp sweat, sheet wet. And at that hour, an hour already lost in a new year, shivering wet. I'm so cold my temples hurt. But before I can really focus on the question of temperature, I realize I've remembered my first dream. Only later, after I find some candles, stomp around my room, splash water on my old face, micturate, light a sterno can and put the kettle on, only then can I respond to my cold head and my general physical misery, which I do, relishing every bit of it, in fact. Anything is better than that unexpected and awful dream, made all the more unsettling because now for some reason I can recall it. Nor do I have an inkling why. I cannot imagine what has changed in my life to bring this thing to the surface. The guns sure as hell were useless. Instantly confiscated at sleep's border, even if I did manage to pick up the Weatherby before my credit ran out. An hour passes. I'm blinking in the light, boiling more water for more coffee, ramming my head into another wool hat, sneezing again, though all I can see is the fucking dream, torn straight out of the old raphe nuclei care of the very brainstem I thought had been soundly severed. This is how it starts. I'm deep in the hull of some enormous vessel, wandering its narrow passages of black steel and rust. Something tells me I've been here a long time, endlessly descending into dead ends, turning around to find other ways, which in the end lead only to still more ends. This, however, does not bother me. Memory seemed to suggest I've at one point lingered in the engine room, the container holds, scrambled up a ladder to find myself alone in a deserted kitchen, the only place still shimmering in the mirror magic of stainless steel. But those visits took place many years ago, and even though I could go back there any time, I choose instead to wander these cramped routes, which in spite of their ability to lose me, still retain in every turn an almost indiscreet sense of familiarity. It's as if I know the way perfectly, but I walk them to forget. And then something changes. Suddenly I sense for the first time ever the presence of another. I quicken my pace, not quite running, but close. I am either glad, startled, or terrified, but before I can figure out which, I complete 2 quick turns, and there he is, this drunken frat boy wearing a plum-colored Tofa Beta sweatshirt, carrying the lid of a garbage can in his right hand and a large fireman's axe in his left. He burps, sways, and then with a lurch starts to approach me, raising his weapon. I'm scared, all right, but I'm also confused. "Excuse me, mind explaining why you're coming after me?" Which I actually try to say, except the words don't come out right. More like grunts and clouds, big clouds of steam. That's when I notice my hands. They look melted, as if they were made of plastic and had been dipped in boiling oil. Only they're not plastic, they're the thin effects of skin, which have in fact been dipped in boiling oil. I know this, and I even know the story. I'm just unable to resurrect it there in my dream. Stiff hair sprouts up all over the fingers and around the long yellow fingernails. Even worse, this awful scarring does not end at my wrists, but continues down my arms, making the scars I know I have when I'm not dreaming seem childish in comparison. These ones reach over my shoulders, down my back, extend even across my chest, where I know ribs still protrude like violet bows. When I touch my face, I can instantly tell there's something wrong there too. I feel plenty of hair covering strange lumps of flesh on my chin, my nose, and along the ridge of my cheeks. On my forehead, there's an enormous bulge harder than stone. And even though I have no idea how I got to be so deformed, I do know. And this knowledge comes suddenly. I'm here because I am deformed. Because when I speak, my words come out in cracks and groans. And what's more, I've been put here by an old man, a dead man, by one who called me son, though he was not my father. Which is when this frat boy, swaying back and forth before me like an idiot, raises his axe even higher above his head. His plan, I see, is not too complicated. He intends to drive that heavy blade into my skull, across the bridge of my nose, cleave the roof of my mouth, the core of my brain, split apart the very vertebrae in my neck. And he won't stop there either. He'll hack my hands from my wrists, my thighs from my knees, pry out my sternum and hammer it into tiny fragments. He'll do the same to my toes and my fingers, and he'll even pop my eyes with the butt of the handle, and then with the heel of the blade attempt to crush my teeth, despite the fact that they're long, serrated, and unusually strong. At least in this effort he will fail. Give up finally. Collect a few. Where my internal organs are concerned, these too he'll treat with the same respect, hewing, smashing, and slicing until he's too tired and too covered with blood to finish, even though, of course, he really finished a while ago. And then he'll slouch exhausted, panting like some stupid dog, drunk on his beer, this killing, this victory, while I lie strewn about that bleak place. Der absoluten Zerrissenheit. As it turned out, I ran into Kyrie at the supermarket this last November. She was buying a 14.75-ounce can of Alaskan salmon. I tried to slip away, but she spotted me and said hello, collecting me then in the gentle coils of her voice. We talked for a while. She knew I was no longer working at the shop. She'd been by to get a tattoo. Apparently a stripper had gotten a little catty with her, probably Thumper. In fact, maybe that's why Thumper had called me, because this exquisite-looking woman had, out of the blue, spoken my name. Anyway, Kyrie had gotten the BMW logo tattooed between her shoulder blades, encircled by the phrase, "the ultimate driving machine." This apparently had been Danskman's idea. The $85,000 car, it turns out, is his. Kyrie didn't mention any ire on his part or history on our part, so I just nodded my approval and then, right there in the canned food aisle, asked her for the translation of that German phrase, which I should have amended. Could even do it now, but, well, fuck 'em, ass. Note 391. See footnote 310 and corresponding reference. Editors. Endnote 391. And so voila, it appears here instead. Utter dismemberment, the same as dejected member, which I thought she said, though she wrote it down a little differently, explaining while she did that she decided to marry Danskman and would soon actually be living, instead of just driving, up on that windy edge known to some as Mulholland. As I conjure this particular memory, I can see more clearly her expression, how appalled she was by the way I looked, so pale and weak, clothes hanging on me like curtains on a curtain rod, sunglasses teetering on bone, my slender hands frequently shaking beyond my control, and of course the stench I continued to emanate. What was happening to me, she probably wanted to know, but didn't ask. Then again, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe she didn't notice. Or if she did, maybe she didn't care. When I started to say goodbye, things took an abrupt turn for the weird. She asked me if I wanted to go for another drive. "Aren't you getting married?" I asked her, trying, but probably failing, to conceal my exasperation. She just waited for my answer. I declined, attempting to be as polite as possible, though something hard still closed over her. She crossed her arms, a surge of anger suddenly igniting the tissue beneath her lips and fingertips. Then as I walked back down the aisle, I heard a crash off to my left. Bottles of ketchup toppled from the shelf, a few even shattered as they hit the floor. The thrown can of salmon rolled near my feet. I twisted around, but Kyrie was already gone. Anyway, back to the dream. Me chopped up into tiny pieces, spread and splattered in the bowels of that ship, and all at the hands of a drunken frat boy who, upon beholding his heroic deed, pukes all over what's left of me. Except before he achieves any of this, I realize that now, for some reason, for the first time, I have a choice. I don't have to die, I can kill him instead. Not only are my teeth and nails long, sharp, and strong, I too am strong, remarkably strong, and remarkably fast. I can rip that fucking axe out of his hands before he even swings it once, shatter it with one jerk of my wrist, and then I can watch the terror seep into his eyes as I grab him by the throat, carve out his insides, and tear him to pieces. But as I take a step forward, everything changes. The frat boy I realize is not the frat boy anymore, but someone else. At first I think it's Kyrie, until I realize it's not Kyrie, but Ashley, which is when I realize it's neither Kyrie nor Ashley, but Thumper, though something tells me that even that's not exactly right. Either way, her face glows with adoration and warmth, and her eyes communicate in a blink an understanding of all the gestures I've ever made, all the thoughts I've ever had. So extraordinary is this gaze, in fact, that I suddenly realize I am unable to move. I just stand there, every sinew and nerve easing me into a world of relief, my breath slowing, arms dangling at my sides, my jaw slack, legs melting me into ancient waters. Until suddenly my eyes, on their own accord, commanded by instincts darker and older than empathy or anything resembling emotional need, dart from her beautiful and strangely familiar face to the axe she still holds, the axe she is now lifting, the smile she is still making even as she starts to shake, suddenly swinging the axe down on me, at my head, though she will miss my head, barely, the axe floating down instead towards my shoulder, finally cutting into the bone and lodging there, producing shrieks of blood. So much blood. And pain. So much pain. And instantly I understand I'm dying, though I'm not dead yet, even if I am beyond repair. And she has started to cry, even as she dislodges the axe and raises it again, to swing again at my head, though she is crying harder and she is much weaker than I thought, and she needs more time than I thought to get ready to swing again, while I'm bleeding and dying, which now doesn't compare at all to the feeling inside, also so familiar, as the atriums of my heart on their own accord suddenly rupture, like my father's ruptured. So this, I suddenly muse in a peculiarly detached way, was this how he felt? I've made a terrible mistake, but it's too late and I'm now too full of fury and hate to do anything but look up as the blade slices down with appalling force, this time the right arc, not too far left, not too far right, but right center, descending forever, it seems, though it's not forever, not even close. And I realize with a shade of citric joy that at least, at last, it'll put an end to the far more terrible ache inside me, born decades ago, long before I finally beheld in a dream the face and meaning of my horror. End note 390. As they start to sum up the Haven-Slocum Theory, the couple quotes from Johann Scheffing's posthumously published journal. At this late hour, I'm unable to put aside thoughts of God's great sleeper, whose history filled my imagination and dreams when I was a boy. I cannot recall how many times I read and reread the story of Jonah, and now as I dwell on Navidson's decision to return to the house alone, I turn to my Bible and find among those thin pages these lines. So they took up Jonah and cast him forth into the sea, and the sea ceased from her raging. Jonah 1:15. Note 392. Johannes Scheffing's The Navidson Record, Trans Gertrude Rebsamen, Oslo Press, May 1996, page 52, endnote 392. It seems a somewhat bizarre reference, until Haven and Slocum produce a second peer table documenting what happened once Navidson entered the house on Ash Tree Lane. Post-exposure effects rating, 0. Alicia Rosenbaum, headaches stopped. 0. Audrey McCulloch, no more anxiety. 1. Tappet C. Brooks, improved sleeping. 1. Sheriff Axnard, end of nausea. 2. Billy Reston, decreased sensation of cold. 3. Daisy, end of fever, arms healing, occasional echolalia. 1. Kirby Wax Hook, return of energy and potency. 4. Chad, better goal-directed flow of ideas and logical sequences, decreased aggression and wandering. 1. Karen Green, improved sleeping, no more unmotivated panic attacks. Note, dark enclosed places will still initiate a response. Decreased melancholia, cessation of cough. 1. Will Davidson, no more night terrors, cessation of mutism. Note, evidence by Navidson's use of the high 8 to record his thoughts. The Haven-Slocum Theory, TM. 2. Even more peculiar, the house became a house again. As Reston discovered, the space between the master bedroom and the children's bedroom had vanished. Karen's bookshelves were once again flush with the walls, and the hallway in the living room now resembled a shallow closet. Its walls were even white. The sea, it seemed, had quieted. Was Navidson like Jonah? The Haven-Slocum Theory asks, did he understand the house would calm if he entered it, just as Jonah understood the waters would calm if he were thrown into them? Perhaps strangest of all, the consequences of Navidson's journey are still being felt today. In what remains the most controversial aspect of the Haven-Slocum Theory, the concluding paragraphs claim that people not even directly associated with the events on Ash Tree Lane have been affected. The theory, however, is careful to distinguish between those who have merely seen the Navidson record and those who have read and written, in some cases extensively, about the film. Apparently, the former group shows very little evidence of any sort of emotional or mental change. At most, temporary, while the latter group seems to have been more radically influenced. As evidence continues to come in, it appears that a portion of those who have not only meditated on the house's perfectly dark and empty corridors, but articulated how its pathways have murmured within them, have discovered a decrease in their own anxieties. People suffering anything from sleep disturbances to sexual dysfunction to poor rapport with others seem to have enjoyed some improvement. Note 393. Of course, as Patricia B. Nesselrode, M.D., noted in her widely regarded self-help book, Tamper with This, Baltimore, Williams and Wilkins, 1994, page 687, if one invests some interest in, for example, a tree, and begins to form some thoughts about this tree, and then writes these thoughts down, further examining the meanings that surface, allowing for unconscious associations to take place, writing all this down as well, until the subject of the tree branches off into the subject of the self, that person will enjoy immense psychological benefits. End note 393. However, the Haven-Slocum Theory also points out that this course is not without risk. An even greater number of people dwelling on the Navidson record have shown an increase in obsessiveness, insomnia, and incoherence. Most of those who choose to abandon their interests soon recovered. A few, however, required counseling, and in some instances, medication and hospitalization. 3 cases resulted in suicide.